Hey, good evening, founders. My name is Connor Kaysen. I'm joined today by the one and only Nick Hughes. And this is Straight Up Startups for Tuesday, September 13th. Today, we got a bunch of different topics on tap for all of us to discuss. We'd love for you to join the discussion on founderslive.com. We're kind of at the top of the list right now, so if you go in there, it's easy to find us. But we're going to be talking today about the iPhone Note 7. We're going to be talking about Twilio. Messages reaching consumers. We're talking about bubbles bursting, how to make a ton of money on Snapchat from Gary V, and changing the world overnight. So Nick, let me give you a little introduction. How you doing today?
Hey man, I'm doing well. How you doing, Connor?
Can't complain, can't complain. Before we start off, I know that you participated in a hackathon this weekend. How'd that go? What was that all about?
Yeah, I did. I actually helped organize it, so I didn't participate, but it was here in Seattle. It was awesome. It was a sports tech hackathon. So what that means is it was all oriented around things around sports, hacking on ideas, and it was fun. It was cool ideas came out of it. The winner was basically it was called Team Stream, and what they're doing is like their pitch was like, hey, look, you go to like a Mariners game and you follow maybe like Jose or like like I'm blanking on the name, but any of the players and but we usually follow very independent athletes. And what if you could have a stream that filters in all of those like the team? You would just follow Mariners, and it would actually sync all that information into one feed, and it would be like not only Twitter but Instagram, Facebook, and it would just be this really clean feed that actually has all the information on there. And so it's just a really aggregated experience around the associated individuals and their social feeds. And what's cool is they actually like had both, and they put this together in like 2 days. They had both the consumer side, it was workable code. They had the feed that looked great, and then they also had a back end where that organization, so they would sell to the organization like the Mariners or Seahawks, and it had like this back end tool where they could manipulate, like they could basically determine whose feed would be seen. They could actually determine like if they needed to okay any posts from individuals, and basically it's a really cool tool for sports organizations to actually can better offer an experience to fans around social media. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and so it's supposed to follow one individual player, not so much the whole team.
Well, no, so it would aggregate the whole team so that you as the fan don't have to go find, like, for instance, like all the players on the Mariners. Like you literally have to go find them and like add them on Twitter,
Yeah.
add them on Instagram, add them on Facebook to follow them. It just goes and then you'd use Team Stream, and you just go and you'd like be able to see all the information like directly in there. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. It just makes it a little bit more engaging to be live in the moment. It reminds
Yeah,
me a lot. Oh, go ahead.
and I would just encourage anyone. So I helped facilitate, and I was just there to organize it and kind of mentor a little bit. But I would encourage anyone, like, if you're earlier and you're not dead set in your company and your project, like, do a hackathon. Whether you're a technical individual that likes to develop, or you're a designer, or you're a business person, or marketing, or whatever, like, they're fun. And that's where calling it came from, was actually a hackathon that happened like almost 4 years ago, and now we're building a product around that. And so I think cool things come out of it for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm glad it was so successful. It sounds fun. Hopefully those guys can run with that and
Yeah,
see
we'll
in the
see.
future.
We'll see.
Cool. Well, let's get to the topics for this week. So the first one comes out. I think everyone's talking about this right now. So it was the reason why we decided to talk about it. But we have to talk iPhone versus Galaxy Note 7. It's a hot thing that's coming out right now, and I think Nick and I have very different opinions. And Nick's on the Apple train, I'm on the Galaxy train. And so I find it really funny that for years now, we've all had this cell phone battle, and now the two big players are coming out, and they both have the name 7. It just seems like, I mean, you couldn't write it better for the history in this battle. And so, Nick, just like, what's your opinion of both phones? Have you looked into it? Do you think one's going to be better than the other? Or where are you leaning?
Man, it's get I think the race has gotten quite a bit closer over the last couple of years. I'll just say that much. You know, I'm actually pretty impressed with iPhone 7. Everything that I read and saw. I mean, look, controversial, but I'm a big fan of removing the phone jack, or like the mic or headphone jack, and going wireless. We can talk about that in a second. But so the link that we had we had linked to here, and the article that literally side by side compares them. I will tell you that, man, I mean, I don't have a Note 7, but it's an impressive device, and I will say that it's as close as, or even better than the iPhone, and I'm not usually the one to say that. But I think I still am on the side of Apple in the sense of their entire experience is better, their ecosystem's better. It's just the entire package, and also it's just great design, and I can't get away from that. So, you know, I think it would take a lot more for me to break away from the iPhone to use a Galaxy Note or whatever. And by the way, there's probably one or two devices that I would ever use that would not Apple, just from the quality standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's pretty impressive, that device for sure. It's clear. It's like the resolution's better. The size. I've never been a fan of the curved side where it's like, oh, you can actually see. I think that's kind of a little bit of it's just I don't think that's needed. But the screen size is actually bigger, right? Like like just showing those two side by side. The actual amount of space that you have as a screen, it's bigger on the Note. So, dude, I'm pretty impressed, and I'll tell you right now. Also, I was like looking at it, I'm like, it's pretty good looking device, and I've always thought Apple products are great looking devices. So the fact that Samsung, and it quite frankly, like making a cell phone right now, a smartphone is not that difficult in terms of design, because the way that you're gonna like make it look on the front end, but I think it's a very good-looking device as well. So I think they're very equal. They're very equal at this point.
Yeah, I think it's crazy to see the designs, how similar they're becoming, right? And Apple is on the forefront of all of that design, and Samsung had to, I'm sure, mimic that in some type of way to get where they're at. But yeah, the screen size, I'm actually a big fan of that curved edge. I think it just gives it that like infinity pool look, where you don't have that border all around it, and I think that's just a unique design concept in itself, and it really is like the only thing that makes it different than the iPhone.
Right.
The big thing with both these companies, right, is like, where do we go from here? Because I think with the next generation, one of them needs to take a big step, whether that's design or something in the software. I just think we're getting to this point where are we hitting the peak and the apex of what we can do with the cell phone as of right now.
Dude, I'll argue this, that I think that what not a lot of people fully grasp yet, and I'm not saying that I grasp it, but I think when you look at the watch and now the AirPods, I think Apple's making that bold leap, which is, again, it's the entire device ecosystem. And if they do it right, you have a supercomputer in your pocket, you have something on your wrist, you have this thing in your ear, and they're all communicating. If not, like, all you need is this to talk to whoever is on the other side, right? And, I think dude, I honestly think that they just threw down their flag. They staked their flag in the ground for the whole Her movie type of experience.
Yes.
And when I saw those AirPods, I was like, oh shoot. I mean, that has a chip in it. That has a gyroscope. It is very intelligent. And everyone thinks that, oh, they're just wireless headphones. No, they're already like, they're developing here and they're developing here. And I think that's where Apple's going, and I think that they actually have the best opportunity to do it. I don't see Samsung doing the best job of that, but they do have the watch, and we'll see what they're going to roll out wireless, for sure. They'll do it.
I think Apple, by going wireless, kind of committed to the whole industry. Like, hey, we're going this way. It's about time, in all honesty, to get to the wire. Everything else is wireless. It was, and there was plenty of wireless headphones on the market. That it was about time. It's just as long as those can be reliable products. And now, the new problem is losing your headphones. Those things are so tiny.
Yeah.
which will be really interesting. I am a little disappointed with the design of the headphones. They didn't redesign them at all. You know, and I know they're Gen 1. I'm sure they're really going to change. And yeah, I have promised, because the movie Her really is so amazing on what they do and how invisible that device looks. And I think it's totally going that way. It really makes a lot of sense. I mean, they were really ahead of the curve with that movie and thinking about that. But I was a little disappointed with the design, and the price is a very common Apple price. But that was the big difference in the price with these two phones is right now the Galaxy 7 is more expensive. I bet with this recall, it's going to go down real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a giant mess. These phones blowing up. That's a hard hit for them. But I remember the last Apple phone was bending in people's pockets too. So there's always some problem. Some people hating on it. I mean, it never ends. But with that extra headphone price, that kind of makes it even again. So I'm interested to see how well those headphones sell. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of Apple people who buy it just because it's got the logo on there. But I think it's a big opportunity for a third party person to come in and really, you know, try to take some market share if they can put a quality product out there, kind of like Beats used to do.
Yeah.
But they had Beats. Like, I don't know where the acquisition of Beats, how that didn't get included in some type of way into this new design. Hopefully it gets implemented later.
No, I mean, so we're gonna stay on this topic just a little bit further.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Dude, it totally made sense for me anyway. The moment I saw those AirPods, I was like, oh, that's why they bought Beats. They bought Beats for the IP, the best quality headphones in the world. They bought it for that team and the IP. And it's not headphones, dude. It's literally a cell phone in your ear. It's a supercomputer in your ear. And I think that put them above and beyond everyone else for sure. And that's what makes sense to me was, okay, $3 billion, which, by the way, like, you know, they have so much cash that it's
nothing.
Okay, here we go. And that, it just made so much sense to me. So I think that, yeah, it's not about creating like this like really cool hip hop brand with like cool headphones. It was, they basically took that team and went, you're going to work on this. And that was about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And this is part of, and they probably were working on like these small devices anyway. And but it makes sense, man. And I'm pretty pumped, actually. I'm pretty pumped for where it's going, actually. We'll see, but.
Yeah, I mean, the most exciting part to me is finally there is a formidable challenger to Apple, right? And that's what drives innovation, is competition all the time. So Apple has been so far ahead for so long. It's really nice to see someone going toe to toe with them, and competing, you know, and doing well. But yeah, Apple's done a great job in really controlling the ecosystem, from the watch to the earbuds. That is going to be their big advantage moving forward. And Samsung has these products, and I think Samsung's done a good job with getting there. I think I just saw a commercial because they have some type of wireless headphone as well. It's just an optional thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting on who kind of dominates the wearables and just the body in general with all the smart tech.
Cool. Hey, so moving on. The next topic we're going to talk about is very straightforward question. Do consumers actually really want to message businesses? And there's an article here that came out recently. There was a study that they found that the majority of consumers actually are choosing, or that upon a study, when the question is asked, they said, yes, of course, I would like to receive messages or emails from a business rather than face-to-face. And I know that you, Connor, deal with businesses quite often. It's kind of a twofold question, I guess. As consumers, do we really want to message businesses? And are the businesses wanting to interact with consumers or their customers via short message or like, you know, instant message, Facebook message, and all that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough problem, and yeah, the market's obviously going to decide, and we'll see. Just because small businesses specifically are usually so slow to move on technology, that is what's going to be the biggest hindrance, because all the consumers are already on top of this, right? But the market right now is so fragmented. I know there's even a few people out there trying to say, hey, we're exclusively messaging between businesses and the consumers, and there's just so many messaging apps out there that if you're a business, how do you decide? Right? Like, if we're going to go WhatsApp, or we're going to go Line, or we're going to go Facebook Messenger, or I'm going to talk in a second about the normal text message. I think that's kind of interesting. with is that going to even work at all? But the business, like, it's got to be really hard to make a decision on which one we're going to commit to, because then when your consumer, the only way the consumer is going to know that you're there is if they visited you before and they've seen something on your chalkboard or something that says like hit us up on Facebook Messenger, and you get the flow going there. But I'm trying to think as a consumer the use cases about what are the things that I need to message someone for. Like, are you open? Do you have this product? I think inventory questions are kind of the biggest thing, because a lot of other things you can find on the internet. I was thinking like, oh, movie times, but you easily get movie times on Google now. Hours, you get all that kind of stuff. So inventory is really the big thing that I can think about, that you would want messaging for. But just the reply, usually you can find this information way faster by Googling it than waiting for a response. And you kind of get stuck in this loop, even if it only takes the business 1 minute to respond, right? 60 seconds on Google is a long time. You can consume a ton of information in 60 seconds. So kind of where is that, good fit? And so I have a lot of doubts that this is really the future. I thought this poll was really interesting. They polled 6,000 people worldwide, which isn't a lot of people. And there were some really unique answers. And 34% of the people wanted it to just be native SMS, which makes me think that's more biased than American number, because I know the standard SMS is a very American thing and something that we're all stuck on, where the rest of the world operates on all these other messaging apps like Line and WhatsApp, Messenger, whatever it is. And so I didn't really believe this all the way, and at the end I thought the article was really weird. It said like 10% of the people would choose like messaging over sex, which just makes no sense to me, but it was a nice funny way to end. It kept me engaged and interested, and maybe that's just what they were going for. But I just have my doubts about this really being a solution, because the merchants aren't going to jump on right away, and it's just so stratified right now with what's the best way to get that information. And if they can find a great piece of content that can't be provided in a Google search or anywhere else, then maybe we can. But I just haven't been able to think of what is that use case.
Yeah, I agree, man. Like I felt a little. I was questioning this study as well, and it's almost like sometimes if you present a study to certain people, given just simply the list of questions, they're going to answer in the context of, oh, well, yeah, of course, like if I could get a response in 5 seconds, I'll message a business. Mm-hmm. That's not the truth, and that's not the way it's going to work. I mean, truth be told, I tested this and tried it back, 5 years ago in my first startup, which was a mobile payment system, but we actually incorporated messaging and payments in one stream of messaging. So you could text the word sandwich, like I'm going to order a ham sandwich, and the business could actually program that to mean $5.50. So you also messaged the business, but you also paid, and that transaction would happen instantly. And so the merchant would actually know what you ordered, and you can order it, and you could walk over there, and 10 minutes later you go pick up your sandwich. Well, the fact though is what we found was the operations of a business are so complex that depending on if it's a coffee shop or a small deli or a clothing store or whatever the case may be, they're operating in such a variety of different ways that you couldn't standardize the operations of the messaging as well as how quickly they're going to respond. And that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you pick up a phone and you make a phone call and they actually answer, you're going to get instantly you're going to get a message. You're going to get something of an answer. If you choose to Google it, you're going to get an answer quickly. And so yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge here is maybe the latency. So if you need an answer quickly, that's a problem. But there is something that's happening here, and I do think we're going to probably see it on the major platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp and others, is that communications will continue to go through those platforms and they'll grow through those platforms. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be I just think it's going to be a widespread platform like Facebook or Google or others, just because they have the reach. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we know what it's going to look like. I don't know what the user experience is going to be. So yeah, it was very interesting. But I wanted to ask you, just because you have that deep experience with local businesses, and I'm curious if they're even interested in that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're still getting their feet wet with how does it work with social media. It's so interesting. I think businesses, especially right now, can gain so much from social media if you're active or proactive within the networks in getting people to notice you and interacting and kind of engaging. I think there's a huge free marketing opportunity that thousands, if not millions, of businesses are really missing that opportunity just for little micro engagements with people, whether it's liking a photo or commenting or responding to their comment. There's a lot of potential with that, especially within anything that looks good, right? Food and clothing. It's such a low-hanging fruit to reach on and get
Right.
free marketing. You just got to put the time into it or put one of your associates on it. But messaging is definitely the future. I mean, all the millennials are all about texting over doing the phone call thing. So if they can find the right use case, I just think it's going to be a free product, right? Doing the messaging, I just not sure if they're going to be able to make money on it. But moving on, the next topic, it comes from Recode, actually, and they had a podcast earlier this week with Benchmark's Bill Gurley. And I want to give a little background for any of you guys watching. If you're not familiar with Benchmark, they are like one of the top VC firms in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They got their hands in absolutely everything. From Uber to Grubhub to Yelp to Nextdoor, OpenTable, Zillow. I mean, they're all over the place. I think they're very famous for passing on Google really early on. That was kind of one of the big misses that they had. But Bill Gurley is he's actually most well known for how tall he is, right? 6'9", so he's above the crowd, as one of his books called. It's very clear when he's in a room, people know who he is. He actually in March won the VC of the year at the Crunchies from TechCrunch, which I know doesn't mean too much, but he's still a very big prominent guy. And in his blog, he actually is very bold about talking about this bubble bursting. I think he always continues that conversation because it shows up for a couple weeks and then it goes away and then it shows back up again. I think he's constantly bringing it up, which I think is great because he's been through it. He was there in the early 2000s when that bubble burst, and I know he was really well renowned because when that bubble burst, he reached out to all of his CEOs and founders and pretty much said like, hey, you guys, times are getting rough. You better save your money, hunker down, start saving. But this is when blood is in the water, right? And I really loved what he had to say. He's like, this is the time where we attack them, right? You just go straight for it because the market is so volatile. You know, a lot of people are going to be falling out, and so the cream's going to rise to the top. And so this is really the opportunity to work even harder and kind of get to that point, which I really admired. So yeah, he just came back out, and he's still worried about the bubble. And he says it's a big thing. And he was at a recent conference, and they had 8 unicorn startups. And he said that 5 of the 8 companies used the word trillion. Right, trillion is still a number that is insane. We're talking about Apple. Apple's not even halfway there yet. So saying a trillion is something that he's just like, whoa, guys, like, well, you're putting the car in front of the horse. And so Nick, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the bubble. I think we're kind of in agreement that yeah, it's definitely going to come. How's it going to come? But what do you think about his comments here?
I think that he's onto something. He's very outspoken, and I mean, you can cry wolf 100 times, and when the wolf comes, then you're right. I think that's one aspect here, but in the end, he's willing to speak his mind. I think that he's right. Look, dude, since 2008. Let's call it 2009-10 timeframe, as the things started to kind of come back, we haven't seen terrible times. That's what, 7-8 years, and that's crazy. As essentially like, bubble times for investment or raising money as a startup. It's been pretty easy the last 5 years, relatively speaking. It's not easy, but there's been a lot of money, and you look at the stock market and nothing, it's only been essentially level or going up. And then, so all this, he's really just saying, look, what we've been doing and what the climate has been for the last 6, 7 years is not what it's going to be for the next 6, 7 years. And I agree with that. I didn't listen to I didn't have time to listen to the entire podcast, which I will. I listened and read to pretty much everything he writes and says, because I think he's someone to listen to. But yeah, I think from what I can tell, it will slow down. It won't be a burst like 2001. It probably won't be something like 2008. What my take is it will continue, like quarter by quarter by quarter, it'll just kind of depress a little bit. I think the market's going to go down. I think investors are going to tighten their wallets and not be as freely investing in these like early stage. I think you have to prove a lot more. Which I think is good for a founding team and for a startup. But yeah, you're not going to be able to raise $1 million like that, or 30 million like Klinkle. Like I think you look at things like that, which is like that was just like what the, and it was just a sign of the times, right? So yeah, I think that we need people like him, like Bill Gurley, to simply say, hey, there's waves coming, recognize. And he's warning the right entrepreneurs are going to listen, myself included, like take the right measures, change your mind, and think about things in a new way so that you don't get caught and things just crash on you.
Yeah, I just really appreciate that he sticks to his guns, because yeah, I mean it's just got to be crazy to be in some of these circles that raise this kind of money, just to be down in the Bay in general and see everyone's raising $1 million somewhere, at some point. And yeah, I just appreciate that he's out there still warning people, right? And it is a little bit cried wolf. Like at some point, obviously he's going to say, "I told you so." It doesn't mean if it's going to be in a year or 10 years, but at some point he will. But I really like that he was outspoken here about like there are no rules about profitability anymore. Like that doesn't make sense. And we got to make sure that we so many of the investors were there before. Right. So don't forget about that. Don't forget, basic economics and business principles about how companies work. And so anytime he's going to say that, I'm kind of on his back, because I think it's just going to cool the climate a little bit and make sure everyone's on guard.
Well, closing statement here, and then we'll move on. But what I think is kind of crazy is, I was just thinking about this, is if you are a founder and you are in the end letting the timing of the market and maybe, quote, a bursting of the bubble influence you and actually throw you off trajectory, you weren't building an incredibly impactful business.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to follow a trend and chase money. And so I think I would suggest, as an entrepreneur, like know the market conditions and look out 2 to 3 years and understand, okay, this and that might happen, and be prepared. But I don't think Jeff Bezos was ever thinking like, oh, I better raise now, like I better do this thing now or it's probably not going to work. Like that's bullshit, right? So any great entrepreneur can handle a downturn as well as a growth expansion, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But let's move on, my friend. So this next topic and concept comes from a post on Founders Live, which basically talking about naming your startup. And this individual was going around like literally just kicking things around. It was actually an HR business that he's building, and he was trying to figure out his name. He actually figured out the name of his company, and it turned out it was his last name with HR, which I think it worked out well. It sounded like it's going to be a good name. But I think the question here is, what are some processes around naming a startup? Like, it's not easy, right? Like, not only URLs and domains are not available, but now there's just so many different names that are taken. Like, how do you go about naming a company in a startup?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to get harder, right? It's when you think about maybe 100 years from now, and obviously we don't know what the internet's going to be, but how are people going to come up with new things, right? And be novel. It's going to be really interesting, because the amount of names and domains that are registered now is just absolutely insane. And I think that does open the potential for all these new, like, our new domains that are opening up, the, .clubs, .biz, every, combination. I think that's going to become a lot more important. I'm really interested to see when the shift is going to be, when .com's not so important anymore. Right now, since we're still really new into the whole internet, consumer-facing internet side, it's only .com, right? If you don't have a .com, then you're really going to struggle no matter what. But I think, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, that's not going to be the case anymore. Where .com might just be like, oh, they're old, like, and everything else is going to be on some new trend. Yeah, I just because everything's taken.
Yeah.
But I really like what Jason did here. First, he did a bunch of research, right? And he came up with a bunch of names on his own. I'm sure he did a ton of like whiteboarding and just writing thousands of different names down and whittling it down. And then it's all about doing his research. And that's what I like how he laid out here, right? The things he checked for were SEO, right? The domain names, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and said, is there any one of these that hits all those spots that I can claim all those? Because if you have that kind of foundation, that's a really good place to start, because you'll be consistent all over, and that is a very important piece to have. But I really appreciate that he put it out online. I think that's a really smart idea, because then it gets opinions, and he, I think it sounded like a lot of people were against a ton of the different names, and that's good. But then you can take that with a grain of salt and make the final decision, but really get a sense of what is this random group of people that I don't really know, who I do know are founders and entrepreneurs on Founders Live, right? So they kind of fit in this niche, but they know nothing about me. They don't know what we're doing, and just put it out there. I thought that was a really great idea. I was just anyone to look like, he got a decent amount of responses on Founders Live, and for being a new network, I think that's great. But putting that out for other people to give feedback, I just think is ingenious, and everyone should try it.
Yeah, I think he went about it the right way. I probably wouldn't have gone through 1,700 names or whatever whatever he did. But here's my thoughts. Is I'll go from this direction. When you think about it, first of all, like, you got to think about what your company and product is, or service, right? So he's not a product like an app. He's HR, and that's why in the end I said, I think that your name, which his last name is pretty unique, Cavness, I think that's how you say it.
Yep.
And I was like, dude, that actually works really well in the name of, like, Cavness HR. And so if you're doing a service, you can actually utilize your name, and if it works, it works. But when you're looking at a product, I have a few things that I look at, and I've named a couple things, and I think that they've turned out pretty well at this point. So, I look at, like, you have to think about, okay, what's the emotion that an individual is going to have when they use your product? So you think about emotions and how someone's going to feel. You also want to think about spelling. We've talked about this before. Notice, it's kind of hard to spell, right? In terms of the specific way you got to spell it. And if you think about saying it, people have to be able to verbalize and say those letters, and when people read it and they say it, they've got it. They have to be able to remember it. Also, how, like, when you look, like, is the domain available? Which, by the way, I think clearly there's workarounds, and I don't think the exact is the URL available the only thing that you need to think about, but it's something you need to think about. If it's an app, the trend now is, they're kind of like, screw the domain, you just call it a simple word, like, peach, or, that's the trend now, is like, it's going back to these, like, not these, like, words with all these, syllables in them and all these consonants. It's actually, like, just a simple word, and you can get away with that in the App Store a lot easier. So you want to think about those things, and I think in the end, you want to think holistically around the brand of what you're going to build, and everything from like, when the people look at the word, to how they say it, how they hear it, how they search it, and then what you build around it visually and then experience-wise. I think that all comes in. So naming is not something to take lightly. You can't get away with some random word anymore that has no vowels. You got to really dig deep and figure it out.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's your entire brand,
yeah.
Right? So you got to put the time in and the dedication. Someone who knows a ton about brand and probably could help us a ton on this is the now very, very famous Gary Vaynerchuk. And if you guys aren't following him right now, like, you got to get on his blog, and I know he's extremely active on Snapchat and Instagram. But he just posted a recent article that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to share with everyone, because it's just about hustle, right? And utilizing new technology and applying it to your life to have success. And so one of his followers sent in or reached out to him and was talking about how much success he's having in real estate using Snapchat, right? Which was really interesting. And right, he said he was having, closing houses and doing $85,000 a month on summer rentals and exclusively using Snapchat. And what he was doing is, every day, well, first he started becoming a little bit more well known within his community because he would snap the same thing every day. And Gary Vee is very big about this, right? He's about, like, have your hustle. He's like, pick 30 days, do something, and do it every day and blow it up on the internet. And you'll see if it works or not. If not, after 30 days, you just ditch it and do something else. And so what Steve was doing was he was just snapping sunsets, right? And he was using the hashtag #SunsetSteve and putting it on Instagram as well. And it, like, just started catching on, and people were following him, and he had this little decent following of what's the sunset. He's in Malibu, and in California, I mean, up here, the sunsets aren't a big thing, all right? Why we get like one a month that has a lot of good colors. And it's like, oh, that's beautiful. But in LA, it's every single day the sunset is beautiful. It's all that pollution. And so he started to kind of build this trend with, like, oh, people are following me. So then he realized that, oh, instead of putting my house on Vimeo or YouTube, I'm just going to put it on Snapchat, right? And he said he closed the house without the person even seeing it because they saw it on Snapchat, and it just had a different type of engagement, and he was engaging with people. And so, Nick, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think about this?
I think it's genius. I think it's a perfect example of someone in the real estate industry, which is, yes, it's entrepreneurial, but it's not necessarily tech forward and savvy in the sense. And this guy, like, jumped on, and I think he matched up a few things. Like, his insight was this: people like showcasing high quality houses, coupled with beachside, coupled with sunsets. Like, he just combined, it was like a perfect combination, right?
Yeah.
But I think his insight was, geez, like, if you look at the trend of real estate, which went from, like, not, when there wasn't an internet, people just showed people the house, to when there's internet, it was just these, like, very terrible but pictures that you could click through. And then it went to YouTube videos that people would, like, literally walk through a house with a video camera that professionally done, so very, very expensive. He's now going through using Snapchat, and people simply, and by the way, it's cheap because he's the one doing it, and he just captures within a short period of time the best of that house. Plus, oh, by the way, it's, like, situated right on a beach, and it's got reach. He's reaching people, and this woman was, so he's in LA, and she was from Dallas, and she basically sight unseen, was like, and it was $80,000 a month rent. But let's just appreciate that for a second.
Yes.
But this woman rented the house, and I think it's a clear example of being on top of or forward thinking in utilizing this technology for actually what it could be used. Like, it's capturing something of value and putting it in front of people. And dude, it probably takes him 5 minutes to do it. And he pushes it out, and after that, it's out of his hands, and someone will click and be like, hey, I want that. Boom, sale. So I think it's genius, man. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really impressive, and yeah, it's a very niche example, right? Because there's not a lot of people who are going to rent $85,000 houses. But to the point, right? There was only a select amount of people in general who were even in the market to get this, right? And I don't think it really talks about how she found it, right? But if she was in another state and somehow whether someone sent it to her or recommended it to her, it got to her, right? And it found that one customer who had the financial flexibility to rent that house for the summer. It's pretty amazing. And so my big point I want to share, I want to share Gary Vee, and I know you're a big fan of him too, because he has I mean, his style, the reason why he's become so famous is it's so different than everyone else, right? He's all about the hustle, and he works in a different way than actually a lot of the people I woke up to. That kind of, he doesn't have like this. I mean, he has like this like New Yorker boxer vibe, right? That he's just gonna like punch you in the face every day. And I really like that. I think that's very different from a lot of the other guys that I follow that kind of have more of a Zen feel, which matches my personality. But you know, he just says, get out there. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to hustle, you got to do it, right? And you have to commit to it. Go out there every single day, trying new things, getting content out there. He's all about creating content. He's probably going to become one of the most famous content creators that are out there because he's been so innovative. And I remember seeing one interview with him where he was telling this young guy, he was like, I don't care what you do, just do it, right? Just get out and make content every day. I don't care if you start on 200th Avenue and for 200 straight days you walk down every street and you interview one person on the corner for 200 days and you get all that content out there, because then it's out there and you'll learn things and you'll grow from there. And that kind of hustle is just really inspiring to me, to, you know, like always be thinking of new ideas, get out there, do the work, put in the time, and you know, and you'll figure it out.
Dude, I got to take a little short story here. I have not met him yet, which I'm pretty sure I will, but the best video or little clip that I've seen from him is, so I watch this, Stanford does, every quarter they do it's the Entrepreneurial Thought Leader Series, and they had Gary Vee come in. Dude, he sits down in front of a college class that they're studying entrepreneurship, by the way. He sits down and he like sits down in the chair, and literally the first thing he says is, he kind of thinks a second, he's like, the mere fact that you all are in here tells me you're not a fucking entrepreneur. So good luck. And everyone just kind of sits there, and he's like, basically he's saying, if you're a real entrepreneur, you'd be out there. You'd be building your company right now. Why are you sitting in a classroom trying to learn about entrepreneurship? And he then like kind of rubs it off as a joke, and then he goes into like an hour's worth of like, you know, speech and great content. But man, like I think everyone was like looking around like, oh my God. And that's the truth though, man. Like, look, if you're a real entrepreneur, you're doing this, you're out there, you're creating your company, you're not sitting in a classroom taking notes and telling, you know, hey, tell me how to be an entrepreneur. And yet, yes, it's a college course, I get it, they're students, but he was like, you think I went to college? He said, no, I freaking hustled so that I can build my company so I can be here right now. I didn't go to college to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, that's my favorite. I wish I was in that room at that moment, because I think the professors that like set it up were like, oh shit.
Yeah, they didn't know what they were getting into.
Yeah, it was pretty massive, but hey, we got to move on.
All right, I think the next one's yours.
Yeah. So this next one's really interesting, and I think, you know, we don't need to spend a tremendous amount of time on it, but this came from the Collaborative Fund, which is actually a newer investment fund down in the Valley. I've actually really liked them, what I've followed from them and read. And they wrote a post recently that basically says, you know, look, changing the world does not happen overnight. And they use the story and the example of the Wright brothers. You know, they flew in like 1904, I believe it was, or 03, something like that. And
I think it was 03.
03. And the fact is that no media picked it up. No one talked about it for like literally years. Then people started saying that we have discovered flight, and I think we should take into consideration media was not moving as fast as it is now. But the point here is that it takes a long time for people to fully understand what you're doing if you're doing something very transformative. And we should know that. We shouldn't freak out if someone doesn't understand our idea. We should continue to be very patient and just have a vision and build it. And, you know, so I think my question to you would be, you know, given that it's so fast-paced now, you know, it's quarterly earnings, like, how should founders think about when they're developing a very interesting kind of idea that maybe is not fully understood? What are your thoughts on if someone doesn't get it in, you know, a couple meetings, like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love this because I think every entrepreneur should kind of have that reminder That's just kind of a grounding moment. Like, hey, if you are really committed to what you're doing, make sure you keep that focus and you stay heads down and do what you set out to do and accomplish the goal. And don't worry about it. I know we've talked about how cheap advice is, right? And how quickly it is to, even if it's someone, uber successful like Gary Vee, right? He might tell you something, but it might not actually be the right advice, right? So you need to take it, you need to process it and actually make the decision, because that one decision, compounds it through lots of decisions, and it could have a great or a really negative effect on you. And so taking that time and staying heads down is very, very important, and sticking to your mission. Obviously, yeah, things have changed a lot because now if you get the world is so much about getting your 15 minutes of fame right now, especially in tech. I was down in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, right, and I was staying at a friend's house, and he was a not Code Fellas. Oh my gosh, what's the big incubator that's down there?
General Assembly.
Y Combinator, right? He was a Y Combinator. He raised $2 million. He had an article written about TechCrunch, right? And he said it really stuck with me. He was like, right, it's a bucket list, like check off the list, but I don't even care about those things, right? Like, I'm trying to build a company that's something way bigger than my 15 minutes on the top page of Product Hunt. And that really resonated a lot with me, to just be like, he wasn't going to get caught up, and that was him accomplishing his goal. It's like, yeah, that gave us a little uptick and got us some extra traffic, but we're trying to build something that lasts a lot longer. And you really need to focus about that. Even if you do get your few minutes of fame, that you can't let that get to your head, and you really have to stay focused on what your goal and what your mission is.
Yeah. And, I think we've talked previously, I don't want to contradict myself, because part of me wants to say, hey, look, yeah, keep on your mission, man. Like, don't give up and work 5-10 years. But what I've said in the past is, look, there's aspects of, when it's working, it's not, and don't hold on too long if it ain't working.
Yeah.
So taking those apart, what's first of all, it's a different time than it was when the Wright brothers flew. So let's all acknowledge that. So the wisdom that maybe was correct in the 18th, 19th century is not correct in the 21st century. And I think what we need to look at is, if you are dead set on your vision, of course, be patient, work hard. But there is a point where your vision or your mission you're trying to accomplish is just not something that people are going to pick up on. Yeah. And that's the truth as well. So you have to balance that. And I think that is the biggest founder challenge, is to figure out, how do I continue, and how long do I continue, or when do I pivot, change, quit, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think I'm going to side with, I do agree with, you just mentioned it earlier with Gary Vee, is he's all about hustle and trying things. I use the word experiment. I think that's my word. Try a lot of experiments. See what works. See what doesn't. And cycle through those. You might still have a mission and a vision that's grand that you continue with, just like the Wright brothers did. But of course they tried little things. They tried little experiments, and they said, okay, this worked. This didn't. Throw that away. Keep this. That's what they did. So, yeah. That's my thoughts now. Is I think you iterate and cycle through a lot of various experiments that are short-lived, gather data and change and move on.
Yeah, it's a really great line about, is it working, is it not working, and when should you jump ship? Yeah. Really, or close it all down. Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. But like the guys at Airbnb, I think they worked for like 6 years on Airbnb before anyone knew about it all, before they had any rentals going. Right, and so yeah, it's just it's picking the right time. Yeah. And there's some luck involved there too. Totally some luck involved with almost everyone with where they get. They just got to be at the right place at the right time. But moving on, there's an article I shared from thinkentrepreneurship.com, and it was just talking about organization tips. And I think this is great for all entrepreneurs and founders who are very busy. And so he talked about 7 different topics about how to organize yourself. He didn't really he talked about a few products that he uses, and that's more what I want to ask you. But the 7 things that he said is designate a place for everything, right? Know where everything's at to stay organized. Look at your space through someone else's eyes. Try out the KonMari method, which is from a book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Know where you're going and park on a downhill slope to get some momentum. Turn a to-do list into a to-do schedule. Put your schedule where others can see it and stick to a system. And so, Nick, I want to know, what do you do or what tools do you use on a weekly or daily basis to keep yourself organized?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'll answer it this way. The one that jumped out at me was just your to-do list becomes your schedule. And I'm not saying that I'm not the person that writes to the 15 minutes, but I was interviewed on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and he asked a similar question, and I described that my day, given that I'm working on a number of things, clearly Founders Live, one of them, I have a couple other projects going on. My day is pretty unique. I'm possibly working on 3 different companies in one day. And what that requires is on my iPhone, I actually just use my calendar, and I'm blocking out time, and those are the things that I'm working on. And I work around the set meetings that are already there, but I'm blocking out time. I'm not using, I don't take my to-do list and do 11:15 this, 11:45 this. I don't do that. But for me, it's simply the best thing I've figured out in the last, I would say, couple of years is utilizing my calendar. And then on the calendar, I have that set a notification for the next thing. It literally, I will set the calendar date or the event on the calendar that's this project, and I'll literally say, notify me at the time of the event, which is my phone will just tell me time to move on to the next thing. And what's crazy is that's allowed me to be very effective on the things I'm working on a daily basis. So I'm scheduling my day. I would say I'm pretty organized on that, and it's worked really well. Clearly, all those other things were very intelligent, and I think that they make a lot of sense. But for me, it's just organizing my time. I don't have a problem with messy space. So for me, it's organizing my time, being very diligent, and it allows me to just cycle through very quickly. Every day I'm very effective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. The ones I really liked through the article, first one, put your schedule where someone can see it. I really like that concept of accountability especially for someone who's in a leadership role and has employees, right? It pretty much just sets the tone without saying it, saying, right, it's setting the lead, right? Look, I've got all these things going, right? Make sure you're doing the same thing. And I think that'll give you kind of a opportunity with your employees for them to know, right, he's not just going to play golf or something like that. He's got a lot of things going on, and it will set a trend and for them to kind of use that as a benchmark to stay active. I know it's a big thing, especially with the ups and downs in startups. And so I really like that. Sticking to a system is kind of what this is all about. And I know I brought up these topics a bunch. It's something that I've been really interested in the last couple of months about how important habits and routines are. And I've been trying to create new habits and get rid of old habits just to make myself better in general, even outside of the workplace. And then knowing where you're going and park on a downhill slope. I kind of go back and forth. I know there's some people out there who are the list makers. I know my girlfriend's one of them. She can be so much more productive if she makes a list and checks it off. And even if she's done with it, she'll write it on the list and check it off right away. Because it just gets that sense of building momentum, yeah. I think, right? I got one done, it's on to the next one. We can get through this and I'll move through a system. And so I think that's really great to write down the task and follow through it. The tool that I've been using and trying out is just Google Task Keeper. And that has a whole page on my cell phone. So I have the home page, and if I swipe left, usually it goes to Flipboard, some type of media. Now I move that one over, and the first swipe left is always my to-do list. And so the concept with that is if I'm going to swipe to look at the news or go consume, my task list shows up first.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a reminder oh shit, don't get distracted. Look at all this stuff that you have to do. Now I'm thinking about maybe I should put it on the right side as well to remind myself with all those other apps. But creating that task list for all the different assignments just kind of helps you keep it in. And I really like checking them off. I think it just helps build momentum and that sense of accomplishment that you can get everything done and fit it all within the amount of time that you want to do.
Nice. Yeah, I think in the end it's find something. It's got to work with your personality, but whatever, it's something that's in front of you that you can tangibly check off or move forward or whatever. That's what's going to work the best.
Yep.
All right. So last topic here, just to finish up. This was a poll that we put on Founders Live, and it just kind of occurred to us that just the topic of if you're going to bring on a co-founder or an employee, should you hire fully for competence or should you hire for culture fit? And it's kind of like if you were going to pick one or the other.
Okay.
And how would you go about it? Let's say, Connor, you are starting a new project, you're a founder of a new company, you're going to onboard. Let's say you might be looking for a co-founder and or an early employee. Which direction are you leaning when you're bringing someone on?
Well, first off, on Founders Live, I really liked this type of poll. I didn't know it had this functionality with the slider. I thought it was really well designed. Really impressed with how that went. I lean more towards culture. I think in the poll I put like 75% culture because with my experience, I think there's a lot of really smart, intelligent, creative people out there. But from my experience, especially in recruiting, it so much depends on, can I even hang out with this person for 8 hours a day? Like when you have a co-founder or a coworker, especially in your startup, you're going to spend more time with that person than your spouse or your girlfriend or your pets or any of your family, right? And so finding a match that works within that dynamic tends to prove more successful. Obviously, it can be distracting, but I think teams are more successful when they fit together like a puzzle piece, and they can work together and they can solve problems and they can get through the problems, right? It's about when it's happy-go-lucky and you can raise $1 million and everyone's super stoked, right? But when you have no money in the bank and you can't pay your employees and your product is in the dumps and you're struggling, right? That relationship between you and the co-founder needs to stay strong. Right. And how you get through those kind of periods is actually what defines you as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a company in the future. And so being able to handle those situations, I think, is more important than being able to have full confidence that you can even build a product.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very, this is a touchy subject just because I think the weirdest thing about it is I think it's underlying why there's an equality and racial and sex issue in our industry. And it's because a lot of people share that opinion, which is, I want to be comfortable and I want to hang out with this person. I want to, if I'm spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day with this individual, if not more, you want them to be like you. And so that's the negative part about this, but I feel the same way, which is, it's probably 70, I think I did 80%. So I would say 75 to 80% is culture fit. And culture doesn't mean they're a white male, mid-30s that has brown hair. It means, to me, it means more like, do I feel comfortable with this person? Do I connect with this person? Do we feel together in what we're doing, and that they could look any way, they could talk any language, blah blah blah. They could be male, female, it doesn't really matter, but I'm looking for that fit, that there's something deeper there. Oh, by the way, yes, they're a great developer, or they are working in this language, or they're a designer, or they're a marketer, or whatever. So I think that's, for me, it's 75% culture fit, and that's important because when people are looking for co-founders, you have to get out of your room, you have to get out of your house, you have to go to events, you have to go put yourself in the environment to meet people, and then continue to get to know them. You have coffee meetings with them, if you go grab a beer or something with them, go grab dinner, figure out if you can actually exist with them through time. And that is a good sign that you're going to be a co-founder, and or an early employee. Go golfing with them or go shopping with them. I don't know what it is, but like spend time outside the office and observe how they handle certain situations, and if you feel comfortable with that. And that's really important when you're hiring the first 5 to 10 people in a company. It's going to feel like a family, and I think that's why it's so important to have a culture fit. Above and beyond, of course, they have to have competence at least some level. But I think the insight here is you're not looking for the best in the world if they don't fit your culture. It's going to be a blow up. It's not going to work.
Yeah. So do you think, kind of a follow-up question, do you think this thinking with like culture being so important now and so talked about, that's increased or decreased the problem of diversity in technology?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's I don't know, man. I think that it's good that it's top of mind. It's good that it's being talked about. I think in the end, I think it's helping because, for instance, let's take a team of like a small startup. It's all men. You know, let's say it's 8 or 10 people. It's all dudes. I think adding one woman or two, so a few women, in the end makes that culture better, more holistic, and oh, by the way, better set for the future to grow the company because you're going to add males and females throughout the future.
Yeah.
But if that team continues to hire men, white men, that don't have very diverse perspectives, the future just continues to narrow because over time it's going to get harder and harder for women to even join that team, or people that are non-white, right? So I think in the end it's tough. It's a weird thing. It's like it's not obvious, or it's not automatic for most people. And this could be like a team of Chinese people, it could be a team of Indian people. Like they're probably not going to hire, or they're going to have a harder time hiring white or black or African American, like Mexican or whatever. So anyone of one culture is going to have trouble adding another one. But the moment you add a different person that adds more diverse culture to your team, you're better off.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that when it comes to culture, putting that diversity standard and those thoughts in there solves a lot of that problem, right? That's something you got to think about up front and solve that problem early. But yeah, that's it. I was a long one, an hour today. But Nick, thanks a lot for joining me as always. It's always great. Hopefully some people this week find the post on Founders Live and take a look and get back to us. Any parting words for us? You got anything going on this week that people should know about?
I would say, so nothing this week, but basically starting next week, there's going to be more live stream conversations that people can either tap into in the moment or see the video later. So on Founders Live, more and more great live video and conversations going to happen. So it's going to be great.
Sweet. Can't wait for it. Well, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for talking with me.
You too.
Thank you all founders that are out there watching. We'll see you next Tuesday.
See you, man.
See ya.